Okay, today I'm going to be talking about a long-held dream of mine that is finally coming of age after about 10 years. And it's this. I want to create a digital avatar that can gesture, that can speak, that can facially emote, and even perform basic social scripts and more, on behalf of people who can't. On behalf of people who have lost the ability to move, who are paralyzed, and who have lost the ability to speak. I'm talking principally about people who have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, Marie-Charcot, motor neuron disease. They're all the same. Full disclosure again, I'm also, yes, I am an actor. My real name as an actor is Pascal Langdale. I'm not Andy Serkis, and I apologize for that in advance. Now, why do I front with that? Well, it's because there's more to being just an actor. A lot of actors are cross-discipline, and I think you'll find a lot of pioneers are also cross-discipline. So I trained as a dancer at the Royal Ballet School where Billy Edward went. I was in musical theatre for a while as a professional. Then I trained as a flamenco dancer right up and kept on doing that until my mid-30s. But I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art from 93 to 96 and have worked in all media since then. Theatre, film, television, audiobooks, narrations, commercials, and video game. And it's the video game that changed the course of my life. I did a video game called Heavy Rain. I played Ethan Mars. And it just happened to coincide with the time when I was obsessed with how non-verbal behavior and academic study, how that related to how I could approach physical transformation as an actor. And while I was working on Heavy Rain, I realized that this system, this approach that I had developed, could be used to create a library that would classify and codify physical gesture and facial behaviors. So I began to build a prototype, and I took it to Gamescom in 2010. And while I was at Gamescom, it was met with polite indifference, this idea. Sometimes actually downright derision. But there was one company that did take an interest. The facial capture companies were generally interested, but Dynamics there was a facial capture company that just started at the same time, were interested, and I'll explain how I work with them a bit further. But that essentially meant that my life somewhat developed into also becoming a head-mounted camera operator, a facial capture specialist. And because they gave me the tools, I could also become a creator as well. At the bottom you see Faster Than Night, which is a live animated interactive drama that I co-wrote, produced and performed. And it was chosen for the Hatch Festival at Harbourfront here in 2014. I'll more about that later. So I'm a cross-disciplinarian, and if you're going to have somebody who's going to work out how to codify behavior, you might as well have somebody with a bookshelf like this. It's got plays in it, it's got a film theory, it's got acting method theory, it has obviously books on non-verbal behavior and interpersonal communication and so on, even flamenco books. So this is what you need to create a library. Now, a library contains books, but of course it can contain gestures and expressions. And the key is the classification system. It has to be able to allow anybody to find exactly what they want. So let me describe what I'm seeing now. I said that I work with Dynamics. Well, they said, well, we take your facial kit, and put it through our system. Okay? So I said, yeah, that'd be interesting. I could not qualify exactly what I had produced, and this was going to be a form of evidence. So I went over and I performed just over 300 different facial behaviors in different situations and contexts. And how facial capture works is that it's video-based, is that it compares images of faces. And it codifies the musculature, the change, the difference between one arrangement of muscles on one face with another. And what you're seeing here is each pixel represents an expression. And if it's close to another pixel, that means that that expression is quite close, physically resembles. Now, the algorithm has no idea about context. It has no idea about where this expression might occur. The colours are there, they're coded because they are fundamental expressions, probably. Okay, so they're all in the same family: anger, happiness, sadness, disgust, surprise. And there's 5 branches, not 7, which is another conversation. Right down in the centre, in the axis of this 3D expressive space, is a neutral. So the further you are away, the more extreme the expression, and the closer you are to neutral, the more closer you are to a neutral. But this proves what I did. I had developed a system, because I can look at any one of those pixels, and I can tell you exactly when I would perform that behavior, in what circumstances. So I've created a system that can actually classify how facial behaviors and gestures change according to who you're talking to and what you're talking about. It's the link between the subjective experience of gesture and the objective coding necessary to make a library. So what do you do about gestures? Well, if you say gesture library, everyone goes, oh yes, gestures, that's what it is, emblems. This is from Thumbs and Ammo, one of my favourite websites. But emblems are quite useless, to be honest, because culturally speaking, a thumbs up means different things in different cultures. It takes a little bit of imagination to know what that means in some cultures. So it's not really useful. There's another sort which is not particularly useful for life, and this is iconic gestures. Now, iconic gestures are gestures that accompany the verbal message and complement it. So if I was to say to you, I wrung its neck, like this, that's an iconic gesture. Multiple things are being told. The words are, I wrung its neck. But now you know that the neck was small. You know how I wrung it. I didn't wring it like this. I didn't use my feet. My hands were close together. And there was paralinguistic. It was difficult. That is all part of an iconic gesture. And then there are beats and batons. These are the most frequently performed. You'll see everybody. I'm doing it now. I can't help it. These are like underliners, the highlights of what you're saying. It's the important words. It's the difference between the cat sat on the mat and the cat sat on the mat. That's the difference. And beats and batons have many, many different forms, and the average baton I can use in procedural libraries, and to some degree some versions of batons. And I can explain a bit more about that later, the difference between procedural and markup. There's deictic as well. Is a classic deictic. Deictic does mean pointing, but it really means indicating a direction. But they don't necessarily need to mean over there. They can also be temporal. So for instance, if I say, I parked the car, that could mean I parked the car in the parking lot behind me, or it could mean I parked it yesterday, depending on the context. Then there's these metaphorics. These are fascinating. I've seen a few people do some metaphorics where your hands create a shape that represent the thing that you're talking about. So it might be, I've seen somebody do this, they did it on the left, and they went, I can't remember the exact subject, it was one like, well, AI is going to be something that helps. And suddenly I was fascinated by how AI ended up being this thing on the lectern that was pushed forward as a proposition. And self-adapters. Self-adapters are, if you've got some kind of emotional or physical discomfort, it's to help regulate what you're feeling. My wife often points out at just the right moment that she notices that when I'm really annoyed, I do this. And that's normally in the middle of an argument, and that really helps. I often say, but it's my head, it's just itchy. And maybe it is, but these are self-adapters. These can be put into libraries, these are great. But, as I said, there's a lot more that I can put into a library when we are thinking about markup animation, where I can trigger certain gestures. It's part of the same system. The procedural must run according to very predictable rules, which is the main difference. And then, of course, there's what you're doing. You're listening. You don't listen in one mode. You listen in many different ways. You listen out for different things. You might be content listening now. You might be discriminative listening, which is enjoying the wonderful sound by English accent. You might be doing any different form. There's 5 or 6 different forms of listening, and it changes the way that you sit. It changes the way that you tilt your head. You tilt your head. It will also change the way that you nod. You might be nodding to say, yes, I agree, or I'm listening, continue, or I don't agree, but continue. These are all different kinds of regulators that allow the the fluid process of a conversation between two people. There might be a touch on the shoulder to say stop, or I'm on your side. These are all regulated, and these I can put into alignment. Why am I doing this? Okay, this is my mum. Yeah, those are old photos. They're old photos because she died in 1997 of motor neuron disease, it's called in the UK. Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And what does it do? Let's just go over that again. ALS interrupts or destroys the capability of the brain to send signals to your voluntary muscles. So, for instance, you might trip up and you'll have a sort of a dropped foot, and you'll think that it's just something a physio can fix, but actually it's the beginning of a process of slow paralysis. You'll lose the ability to walk. You might find a weakness in your arms, and then eventually you won't be able to move them. No matter how much you're telling them to move, it's not going to happen. It's the beginning of paralysis with the arms. It continues and continues, and you lose, eventually, in 90% of cases, you lose the ability to speak because your vocal cords are a voluntary muscle. Your head is being held up by voluntary muscles. Eventually that will drop. Now this is a terrible, terrible disease. But this poses immense problems with communication. What tends to happen is that the communication processes rely on and basically prioritize, which is fair enough, very functional statements. I itch, I'm in pain, and so on. Because ALS is dominated by a very, very intense caring procedure. But that means that even in conversations where the doctor is talking with the carer about the care being involved, the ALS patient gets excluded because, and even if you know that this happens, it's almost impossible not to end up focusing on the person who is actually moving and talking to you. There's no or little opportunity for the patient to basically even go like that, or or none of that is possible. Not in a very quick and appropriate way. Yes, you can use certain technologies to provoke these things, but I think we can do an awful lot more. With my mum, we were relegated to something called scanning, which is the very base level, where you say blink for yes, don't blink for no, is the first letter of what you're thinking of, A to G, H to O, P to Z, blink, P, Q, R, S, blink, S, okay, and then you painfully create these sentences. It doesn't leave a lot of room for personality. It doesn't leave a lot of room for anything other than really functional or very blunt statements. And my mother was blunt in real life. I mean, before she was sick. And this was the premise of my Faster Than Light show. My premise was a multi-billionaire tries to cheat time and space in order to return to Earth when his AI has discovered a way to solve and cure ALS. And the idea was that the device was that he was facially driving an animated rig of himself. The reveal was he was in the last stages of ALS. Now that was 4 years ago, that was in 2014. Scooch forward, even 4 years ago, this was not really possible. It was not quite there, but now we're there. This is quantum capture. I know some of you know these guys. But they're creating digital humans that use text-to-speech or procedure-generated speech to drive their animations. So they are speaking and having their mouth animated, and they're doing all they can to make them more human. They do digital, they obviously do digital dubbing as well, so they can capture a perfect representation of you, their life. So now it's possible to create a digital double, if you want one, doesn't have to be. And you can animate text and get your avatar to speak. But not just speak, you can actually clone their voice. This is something from Lyrebird. You can now actually make your voice, instead of Siri, you can have your voice replacing Siri. And banking statements is a standard procedure when you have ALS. There's about 300 largely functional. There's also I love you, there's I miss you, there's all these things as well. So this is all within the realm of possibility, and that's being done now. I can create this digital fingerprint of their expressive behavior. I can also do the same thing with gesture. I can make a procedurally animated system that basically amplifies their speech. So when they do make an emphasis, that it actually generates a gesture. And the thing is, hang on, let me just get to the right one. And of course, it needn't be a perfect representation of the person. It could be a generic version. You'll need to have plug and play. It needs to be based on archetypes that the person might choose. And then you've got a complete behavior library. And if you mix procedural with markup and have a tool that can do markup, then in theory, somebody who is in a wheelchair and paralyzed might be able to write a speech, procedurally animate most of it, mark up things that moments where gesturally it is them, it's their gesture, it's their style of gesture, and then they can beam that to anywhere on Earth and present as they would have presented, close to, not exact, but close to. And then maybe with the future of AR, you'd be able to put on glasses, we'd be able to see these people. They might be able to turn up at birthday parties, and it would be them. It would be an aspect of them that's being shown. No less than Stephen Hawking's voice, as proceeded as electronically as was, became a Stephen Hawking. But there's a problem, or rather challenge, and that's where these two people meet, where the avatar and the human meet, its interface. There's a lot of moving parts to this. So I'll go through what's there. We have systems where you can pick out pre-recorded statements, like Toby Dynabox, for instance, brilliant piece of technology. You can start off by using your finger, but if you can't use your finger, you can place a tracking button on your nose, and it tracks your nose. Eventually, you won't be able to move your head, so you can wear the Toby Dynabox glasses that tracks your eyes, and that will be able to do the selects. But up here, this has got me very excited. MIT have created this thing that measures the signals that go from the brain to your jaw, to your lips, to your tongue, and transforms that into text. And it's 98% accurate in a healthy adult. Now, when somebody with ALS begins to lose their speech, they can still talk if the signal is being interrupted, for sure, and it's slow and largely monotone. And we don't know at what point this could still serve to produce speech. They might be unable to move their tongue, but the signal is still strong enough to be amplified to create text. But then eventually even that might go, and then we're looking at EEG, looking at fMRI scans that tracks brain behavior. In the numbers, okay, so yeah, very straightforward. 3,000 Canadians have ALS at any given time. Once you're diagnosed, it's 3 to 5 years life expectancy. There's around 400,000 cases worldwide. That's set to go up in 2040. It's meant to go up to around 500,000. And the one that I have to think about is that the age of diagnosis is 46 to 65. If you think about that, that's the moment when experience, productivity, and responsibility tend to meet. It's not, there's no good time in life to get this. But anyway. And what do we lose? Well, we lose people at that time of life, true. But if you look at Wikipedia, you'll see that there's, Stephen Hawking is the outline, there's Charlie Mingus, Sam Shepard, all these famous people, and you think, well, what could they have done and said and been involved in if their personality and their communication could persist for longer? And if that system could be adapted to the progression of their disease, that the library could be expanded and contracted and changed according to their personal wishes, demands, and needs, that the interfaces were based on their capabilities at the time. Okay, you think, well, we have a great loss, famous people, great. When my mother died and I drove down to her funeral, I remember hearing the radio and thinking it was strange that my mother's death was not being announced on the 1 o'clock news. Because she was the most important person in my life. She was the most famous person in my life. And that's who we all are to each other in our family. So when you say what loss, I didn't see my mother smile for 18 months. I could sometimes see it in her eyes, and in the later stage you could still see it in her eyes. But what I would give to have the tool that I'm proposing now, so the tools have come along a long way, don't get me wrong, but how much further could we go? I'll leave you with some words from Steve Gleason. You may know, American footballer who has ALS. I'll do a show and tell. So, Today marks the 6-year anniversary of my ALS diagnosis, and I love my life. I feel purposeful and fulfilled with where I am. I'm excited about what is ahead. I know ALS is a remorseless and humiliating disease. It can leave its victims in a pathetic, silent, purposeless heap of flesh. It can annihilate families. Spouses become unrecognizable to each other, veiled in frustration, anger, and shame. 6 years ago, I was fearful of what lay ahead. I found myself up at all hours searching frantically for an answer, and during all my hours of searching, I found only one solution people were using to stay purposeful and productive: technology. Thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions? No questions.
I think it's brilliant. I really thought, you know, when how did we first meet? Oh yeah, it was through Wanda. And let me get the mic. I just want to say, like, what happened was I first connected with him, and originally we had a completely different idea around motion capture. And then when I heard what he was explaining about, the ability to, the inability to have facial gestures and how motion capture could help compensate for that, I thought, geez, this is perfect. Not only for future computing, but for the healthcare track, and a real vision for the future where these technologies can make a real measurable difference in the world. So I know you applauded already, but I'd like you to applaud again, because that was really simple.